Thank you all for being here this afternoon. Why are you behaving right now? Why are you sitting in your chairs, looking forward, listening quietly? There are no armed guards that are coercing you to do so. Gravity is not so strong that it keeps you glued to your seat. And I am not so interesting that you've completely forgotten that your Facebook and email are begging to be checked. More than likely, you are behaving because that is what you are supposed to do. Those norms about what you are expected to say or do in any given social situation is the stuff of culture. The big idea that captivates me is the idea that culture has power. Culture is a system of symbols and meanings and practices that both shape and are shaped by other social factors like laws and institutions. Culture also helps us make sense of our daily experiences. Now, culture may seem like a weak social force, flimsy, the stuff of other societies and other eras. But as I will argue, culture shapes every facet of our social lives. First, culture is powerful because it compels us to behave ourselves. Cultural sociologist Jeffrey Alexander once wrote, "What fascinates and frightens me are those collective forces that are not compulsory, but the social forces to which we enthusiastically and voluntarily respond." The social world is filled with little rules about how we are supposed to fit ourselves within it. Every social situation, from weddings to funerals to departmental meetings to even mundane things like standing in an elevator, are full of social scripts about appropriate matters of behavior. But why do we follow these rules? Why do we suppress laughter in a funeral or avoid eye contact in an elevator? We follow these cultural rules in part because it makes social situations less cognitively demanding. We also follow them out of sheer habit. But we also follow these rules because there are real social consequences for not following them. These cultural rules are thus powerful not just because they are ubiquitous and because most people know about them, but because we generally voluntarily choose to follow them. Second, culture is powerful because it shapes who we think we are. For Americans, one's self-identity is among one of our most prized possessions. We believe in the dignity and the sacredness of the individual. But selves are social constructs. Culture is not merely woven into social structures and institutions. It is internal and meaningful to social actors. Cultural beliefs are embedded in our deepest understandings of ourselves and can motivate even our most self-expressive actions. In some of my research, I wondered why we still see gender segregation across occupations. I asked, what is the role of self-expression in this segregation? A dominant cultural expectation for college students is that they choose careers that are self-expressive. But through gender socialization and day-to-day engagement with the gendered world, men and women tend to develop somewhat different self-conceptions. So when college students make self-expressive career choices, they thus tend to reproduce sex segregation. The power of this process comes in its cultural framing as individualistic, a framing that masks the cultural role of gender in these self-expressive decisions. Third, culture is powerful because it helps to reproduce social and economic inequality. Now, overtly racist and sexist beliefs certainly reproduce inequality. But what interests me is how cultural beliefs and practices that seem objective or neutral can actually reproduce inequality. Take science, for example. Using the same formalized scientific method in the mid-19th century, scientists thought that if women obtained college degrees, the education would make their brains grow and their ovaries shrink. The point is not that science of the past is laughable, but that social biases, today as then, can seep into scientific and technological knowledge with widespread consequences. Another example is the meritocratic ideology, or the American dream. This is the belief that all you have to do to succeed is try hard. But this also promotes the belief that those who don't achieve success deserve their lot because they haven't tried hard enough. This ideology has important implications for inequality. For example, my research on science and engineering faculty finds that faculty who uphold this ideology are less likely to recognize patterns of discrimination and bias in their own departments. In other words, the meritocratic ideology can render invisible discrimination happening in one's own workplace. Culture matters because it helps to solve the puzzle of why, despite laws that ban discrimination against women, racial ethnic minorities, and LGBT individuals, we still see inequality along these lines. Culture might not be a tangible thing, something you can go up to and touch, but it has tremendous power. If a society deems culture as real, then it is real in its consequences. Thank you.